Mark Rogers, TV talking Ohio State football with the Buckeyes going to camp later this week. We bring in Claire Crawford. She writes for the Ozone.net. Claire, how you doing today?
I couldn't be better if I were twins. I'm doing well. How are you?
That's pretty good. I thought I was doing well, but I don't know if I can match that. But I've got the rest of the day to try. So that's a goal I can set. That's good stuff.
I'm
So,
motivated.
definitely, Claire, when I look at the Ohio State situation and the national perspective on the Buckeyes, um, I liken it to 10 years ago in regards to the Buckeyes coming off 2 national championship game losses. And even though they were the best in the Big Ten was looked down upon in a sense from the national media. And therefore, Ohio State was viewed in some circles as kind of a paper tiger. But this being completely different, even though they lost in somewhat of a devastating fashion against Clemson, I think there's a belief that Urban Meyer has this program in the right place, and they're just going to continue on. And that was a blip on the radar, and they'll just march into 2017 and vie for a playoff spot again. So just kind of your thoughts on where the Buckeyes stand from a national perspective, and just what you hear from the fan base and from other media members.
Sure. Well, actually, Kevin Wilson commented on the other day about the Buckeyes and their attitude after the Clemson loss, and knowing that it could have been taken in a negative way and it could have broken down the program. The general attitude is that there's a maturity amongst this group, and they're using it as a positive motivation. So that's what we want to hear. That's what good teams do. That's what the elite teams do, is to move on to that next level when something like that happens. And honestly, I think Urban Meyer teams that have something to prove end up being overachievers.
When we look at this team, Claire, loaded with talent, the recruiting classes continue to rank near the top of college football. If we look at this particular team and some of the concerns from last year, it was, okay, has JT Barrett lost something? Is the arm strength not what it used to be? Has he become gun shy because the offensive line and the protection's not what it should be? And the Penn State game was kind of the classic example of the offensive line breaking down. And of course, not getting much movement against Michigan and Clemson. The outside receivers probably underperforming to an extent that we've never seen with Ohio State. So what gives you confidence that some of these concerns are going to be cleared up?
Well, I think the general consensus is that Kevin Wilson, our new offensive coordinator there at Ohio State, is going to be bringing an up-tempo offense. That leaves less time for breakdowns to happen. I'm not super clear yet whether it's going to be a simplified offense. Often simple plays end up being the easiest to run a little quicker. He has mentioned that he doesn't have a particular second count that he wants on these plays, but it's definitely been a very clear message that this team is going to be running a lot of tempo. I think that's where JT Barrett is most comfortable. I know for a fact that's where Kevin Wilson is most comfortable. We know that Urban is a fan of that as well. And even Ryan Day, the new quarterbacks coach at Ohio State, has a lot of experience under Chip Kelly with tempo and running an up-tempo offense. And there's a little more season at that offensive line now. So they're going to be they're not having to hold on as long. If, let's say, a play breaks down, they are going to be able to execute a little bit easier. With that comes more need for conditioning and depth. And that's where we're rolling around with some question marks. We know that Mickey Mariotti is one of the finest conditioning coaches, the strength and conditioning coaches, if not the finest in the nation. And he's always got his teams ready with tempo, and Kevin Wilson has mentioned it, that he's going to need depth. He says you can't run tempo with 11 players. So it'll be interesting to see how many players get touches and how they end up rotating that. But it certainly is something that I think JT Barrett is suited for.
Yeah, so you lead me right into my next question in terms of the number of players that are going to touch the football. So we've seen in the past stars at Ohio State, guys on the outside like a Michael Thomas would be, and Devin Smith would be the latest examples of star players that are on the field 80-90% of the time, but more of a rotation last year because they couldn't find guys that were going to make plays. So we could both rip off 7 or 8 names of guys that need to contribute. But who are you looking forward to seeing, whether it's a Paris Campbell or a KJ Hill and on down the line, Johnny Dixon? Who are some of the guys that you think could really be outstanding contributors?
So the first name that you mentioned, Paris Campbell, I'm really excited. It looks like he's going to be moved to the H-back position and following, in Braxton Miller and Curtis Samuel's footsteps in that H-back position, especially with the tempo offense. I will be really interested to see what Paris can bring to the table and if he's suited for that position. It looks like he will be. He'll most likely be on kickoff and punt return. He's a very dynamic player. He has some experience with running back as well. So I'm excited to see what Paris can do and if he can step up and how they're going to use that H-back position, especially under Kevin Wilson's offense. I think he's going to be probably one of the biggest and most dynamic difference makers, other than obviously JT Barrett. And it's difficult, when I hear people say, JT should have moved on, or already somehow calling for Joe Burrow. But I think the combination of the failed JT Cardale experiment and then everybody leaving for the NFL draft, I think it's going to be interesting to see who JT Barrett ends up connecting with this year. But Paris is definitely on my list. Johnny Dixon too. From all reports, Zach Smith has an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver. It's just going to be who ends up standing out. Johnny Dixon is one of those guys that has been nicked up here and there, but it's his time to step up. This is go time for him. This is his time to really make his money.
Claire Crawford joining us from the Ozone. Claire, you're producing my segment for me because I wanted to talk about JT Barrett. So JT Barrett, this is a guy that I've marveled at ever since he came off the bench in relief of Braxton Miller from day one and started setting records in the Big Ten. And scouts just raved about this kid is so fluid in the pocket and anticipates throws and can throw so accurately, and is so smart back there, knows when to run, knows when to hold on to it and deliver it downfield in the face of a pass rush. And suddenly he's got tons of critics. And if you watched Ohio State play last year, you know that the receivers didn't get separation. You know that there were pass protection issues, true freshmen starting along the offensive line in particular. And just your thoughts about JT Barrett coming under such criticism, but at the same time, all we have to do is look out to Las Vegas and see where he's still one of the Heisman favorites.
There you go. Exactly. Well, it's something that as a Buckeye fan, our standards are always going to be really high, ridiculously high, and they should be. There is no reason they shouldn't be. But at times it can be myopic. JT Barrett is on record to break almost every single quarterback record that there is at Ohio State currently. So it's difficult. And I know typically he's a very calm, cool, collected guy. He's still very much a general out there on the field, which I think is a really valuable tool specifically this year. But it still is baffling to me knowing that he's exactly what you said, that he still has these critics. I think with the shift of the offensive coordinators, we were talking a little bit about that before, about the difference between Tim Beck and Ed Warner and their guidance, not just as offensive coordinators, but as a quarterback coach as well. And Ryan Day has a lot of experience with bringing quarterbacks along. And that's not something that we saw a whole lot of with Tim Beck before he was hired at Ohio State. And then we didn't really see a whole lot of advancement of JT as far as his skill set under Tim Beck as well and his guidance. So I'm excited to see what Ryan Day, Ryan Day, obviously he was under Chip Kelly at San Francisco. He's got Colin Kaepernick, Blaine Gabbert, Sam Bradford on his resume as far as quarterbacks that he's helped break records in the NFL. So it's exciting for me to know that, it's come out that JT Barrett is knocking on Ryan Day's door, wanting to get better every single day. And it's just a matter of, I believe Kevin Wilson actually said this, it's putting JT in the best position to be successful. And like you said, the onus isn't only on JT. Offensive line is going to be stepping up. Billy Price is moving over. That's going to be a big help. You've got receivers that Zach Smith is I mean, the onus is now on him. The spotlight is going to be on him. And I think JT has every single tool available for him to be successful at this point. And it makes me excited as a Buckeye fan.
Claire, I don't think it is necessarily an overstatement to say that Ohio State lost more defensive back talent to the NFL than maybe any program in history, with three of the star players in college football that proved to be prime NFL prospects drafted very high. The defensive line is going to be stout. There's just so many tremendous playmakers up there, in a rotation of 7 or 8 tremendous players. Chris Worley at linebacker leading that group. As they head to camp in just a couple days, as you look through August, what are going to be those things that you sorry, talk about? Can you hear my phone?
I can.
I'll edit that and start that over. Hang on just a second. Okay. I've lost you on my screen here. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Claire, definitely with the losses of some of the best defensive backs in the country to the NFL. Despite those losses, another group of defensive backs coming in, some of the top recruits in the nation, and some guys like Denzel Ward that have been in the system for a while. The defensive line is tremendous with the rotation that they have. Chris Worley leading the linebacking group. I see a defense that could be lights out, could be one of the best in the nation. As you look through what you're hearing out of summer camp and fall camp, as we get into that in just a few days, what's going to make you feel better about this team at the end of August? What kind of reports? What do you want to hear out of camp that you have a few little questions about?
It's not going to be much on the defensive side of the ball.
On either side of the ball.
Yeah, on the defense. You said on the offensive?
Either way.
Yeah, and honestly, like you mentioned before, the defense, and what I really love is that once Greg Schiano came in to the program, it was almost like these guys were starving for what he had in store for them as far as defensive scheme and how aggressive it is. And Kerry Combs has been an incredible leader of that team. You know, he's one of those guys that's rah-rah doesn't even begin to cover Kerry Combs' attitude and how pumped up he is. He's like, I don't know, if like PJ Fleck and Urban Meyer somehow made another person, that would be Kerry Combs. But I love the fact that this defense is going to remain aggressive, and that's the other thing about the offense running tempo, which is apparently going to be happening with Kevin Wilson. That your defense is going to need to be equally as deep, if not more so, because they're going to be spending more time on the field. You know, obviously they're going to want to strike fast on offense, and knowing how much depth they have at that position is going to be maybe a question mark, but it looks like from all reports that we're getting here, it's not something that is first on the list of things to have to worry about or question marks that we have as far as defense is concerned. And offense, like we were just talking about before, knowing who is going to step up at wide receiver. Again, there's just this like bevy of guys that can really contribute and have the opportunity, and most likely, I mean, they want to rotate a lot of these guys in. Possibly depth at tight end. I know AJ Alexander is looking like the backup position right now, but we've even got folks converting over from D end to try to see if we can contribute there. And then possibly depth at running back as well. You know, Mike Weber is going to be the clear starter, but it's looking like from, you know, the hot name that's coming out of camp right now for backup is true freshman J.K. Dobbins. You hear words like explosive and intuitive from a true freshman. That's something that's really, really promising as a fan to expect out of somebody as a backup. And he's going to be getting touches as well. Demario McCollum and Antonio Williams as well will be getting some touches at running back, but I think it's going to be important as far as depth is concerned. The more plays you run, it seems like the running backs get the lion's share of tackles and contact when it comes to tempo. So it'll be interesting to see how balanced it ends up being in tempo, and because of that, what kind of depth they're going to end up needing at those positions.
Yeah, we can only take so much from the spring game, but Dobbins and Alexander both had nice spring games, concluding good spring sessions for both of them. Claire Crawford from the Ozone joining us here on Mark Rogers TV to talk Ohio State football. Claire, we need to know where we can find you, and we know that you've got a podcast ready to relaunch.
We so I'm laughing because of the name that we've chosen for our podcast is really ridiculous, but we like to have a lot of fun on our show. You can find me at on Twitter at Buckeye Claire, and it's Claire with no E, just like the way it should be. You can find me on Instagram. I post a lot of all kinds of fun fitness stuff and Buckeye stuff. It's just at Claire Crawford. And our show is on the Ozone. It's going to be called Oh Hail No, as in not hail to the victors. And a close second for the name for the show, we've revamped things a little bit, but anybody that has listened to my show in the past, it was almost named Scarlet and Gravy or Hot Dog Gravy. So as you can imagine, Oh Hail No came out as the unanimous winner.
So who can we thank for coming up with that gem?
Oh Hail No?
Yeah.
I can take full credit for that. But I had to make sure that it was voted on by my co-host Joe Dexter as well.
Well, it's well done by you. And if you would have thrown out those 3 or 4 selections, I think even for as clever as the other ones are, that is the one to go. There's just so many ways you can go with that name, and it means so many things in so many different directions. That's one of the keys to a clever a show name.
The O in Oh Hail No is definitely a capital OH.
And this coming from a guy who calls his show Mark Rogers TV. So I gave that just weeks of thought.
Hey, I'm available for any naming purposes you need.
Okay, we'll think that one over. Definitely. All right, Claire Crawford, her show's Oh Hail No. You'll be able to hear that coming up soon. Check her out on Twitter as well at Buckeye Claire. Claire, we appreciate the time. It was a great discussion. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.